Well, what can I say? This chronograph is a real eye candy. It comes in 3 different colorways, and the version that I have here looks even better in person than it does on product pictures. However, just because it looks good, it doesn't always mean that it wears as nicely, and oh boy, do we have examples of that. Well, I guess there's only one way to find out. Hello and welcome back. Yes, if you recall, only a few months ago Hamilton introduced this, in my humble opinion, a smashing looking chronograph powered by automatic mechanical movement. A lot of people got very excited because it looked like we would get Rolex Daytona looks for the price of Tissot PRX. However, it turns out that this Hamilton Daytona lookalike is practically unwearable unless you have a 9-inch wrist, which also preferably square. Now, before we jump into measuring and trying this recent release from Milifortic, a quick disclaimer: Milifortic did send me this chronograph for review ahead of the November sales, the 11/11 sale, which is going on now, and the Black Friday sale. Yes, AliExpress now has a Black Friday sale as well, just in case you didn't know, and I get to keep this watch too. In return, I'll of course do my part and bring this timepiece to your attention and share a comprehensive review of this watch, so you can make an educated decision if you are interested in this chronograph. And of course, if you want to explore it further, all the necessary product links will be in the description of this video. In terms of the design, we actually have here a classic racing or pilot chronograph looks, although I would argue that at 39mm case diameter this is rather a motorsport style watch than a pilot watch, which usually would start at 39mm plus. I really like the dial design, a very tasteful interplay of sunburst effects on the main dial and on the sub-dials. Combine that with the high-polished applied hour markers and hands, and we get a very good contrast and pretty much perfect legibility. And I think I mentioned this before, I particularly like Milifortic's branding and typography. Too many times brands tend to ruin the visual appeal of their timepieces by choosing completely unsuitable fonts and printing arrangements, so some additional points to Milifortic here. As for the case design, again, it doesn't look like it's homaging anything in particular. However, unlike the dial, the case doesn't look like something special either. Still a nice and clean stainless steel sports watch looks. And while we're talking about the design, we might as well talk about the movement. Milifortic installed here SeaQ Mega Quartz VK63 caliber. Just in case you are not familiar, this SeaQ movement has a quartz-based module and a mechanical chronograph module, which gives us kind of best of both worlds: dependability and accuracy of the quartz and tactile operation of a mechanical flyback chronograph. And mechanical chrono also gives us that smooth sweep of the chronograph second hand, which also allows us to time things with a 1/5 of a second accuracy. So another big tick for Milifortic here for choosing this movement. So, as I mentioned earlier, Milifortic offers this chronograph in 3 colorways. I think each is very interesting in its own right, and as you can see, Milifortic offers this chronograph at a very competitive price too, especially during the sales. Along with the AliExpress official store, they also sell this chronograph from their online store, so I would recommend keeping an eye on both of those platforms for the best deals. Links, of course, will be in the description. Okay, now the good news is that unlike the Hamilton chronograph I mentioned at the start of this video, the Milifortic has a set of very versatile dimensions. The case diameter is 39mm, case height is about 11.8mm, and we also have here 20mm lugs. And arguably one of the most important measurements, the lug-to-lug distance, is only 46.5mm. Combined with the nicely slanted downwards lugs, this chrono should fit wrists starting from about 5 3/4 inches and up. We have a pretty standard coverage of leather strap here up to about 8 1/4 inches, and this watch weighs around 68 grams. As I mentioned earlier, we have here a fairly standard case. One thing that stood out for me was the contrast between the bright and very premium looking dial and much more subdued all-around brushed case, reminding us that this is a sports tool watch and it really means business. The finishing is very decent, almost satin-like brushing is very consistent and looks and feels quality. The transitions between the facets are crisp and well machined. However, I do need to point out that the top side edges of the lugs are somewhat sharp. I would probably never found out about it if I didn't inspect every square millimeter of this case, because these parts don't really come into contact with the skin at any point of normal wear. But now I found out about it, and now you know about it too. On the right hand side of the case we have two chronograph pushers and a screwed out crown, as we would expect, all well proportioned, and the pushers and the crown are easy to engage, so no complaints here. I still think that Milifortic could do a nice engraving of their brand on the crown to differentiate themselves from other brands that utilize very similar cases for their chronographs. Not a deal breaker by any means, but I think it would have been nice. Now, what is nice is the screw-on back case. Okay, it is also sterile like the crown, however it is almost flat, helping with the wrist comfort, and can be unscrewed with a generic tool, which is important when time comes to change the battery. And we have here very practical 100 meters of declared water resistance. I think it is entirely plausible giving a screw-down crown and a screw-on case back, however it is still a chronograph with the pushers carrying a risk of letting the moisture through, so I would advise to avoid any deep water immersion, like swimming for example. In regards to the crystal, we have here ever so slightly curved double dome sapphire crystal. The clear anti-reflective undercoating is very effective, and the legibility of this timepiece is excellent. And the sapphire crystal is installed a fraction of a millimeter above the stainless steel fixed bezel, which should reduce the risk of the scratches on the less scratch-resistant stainless steel. So we've already discussed dial earlier, and I really like Milifortic's approach here to combining contrasting colors and various finishes to achieve a crisp and premium look. Another interesting feature of this dial is that we don't have a rehaut here per se, or more accurately, the rehaut is replaced by a slightly elevated white minute chaptering, which in turn connects with even further elevated tachometer scale, giving the dial an interesting three-dimensional look. Going over the sub-dials, we have here a chronograph minute register at 9 o'clock position, running seconds indicator at 6 o'clock position, and the always controversial 24-hour indicator at 3 o'clock position. To be perfectly honest, I don't mind the 24-hour indicator. I do find it useful when I'm adjusting the time and when I'm traveling. However, I absolutely see the point of the opposing camp. From a chronograph functionality perspective, this sub-dial could have been rather used as an additional register. Which side are you on? Well, do share with us in the comments, and while you're commenting, please do hit that like button to get the YouTube algorithm to do its thing. Right, so we also have here a well-executed set of hands. The hands are high polished and are well filled with lume. I also like the red accent on the tip of the chronograph second hand. Okay, one thing I don't particularly love here, and I'm probably nitpicking, however, while I'm perfectly fine with the date window look and location at about 4:30 position, I'm a bit puzzled why it is not perfectly centered between 4 and 5 hour markers. I've seen other brands do it too. Is it because of some peculiarity of the date wheel on the movement or on the back of the dial? So could be a totally legitimate design constraint, however, I think it would have been better if it was perfectly centered. And now let's look at the lume performance. The lume is actually very decent, especially for the sports chronograph style watch. And while it wouldn't outperform a good diver lume, I would still classify it as above average, especially taking into account the price point of this watch. Now, as for the bracelet, we have a well-presented leather strap. The leather is soft and pliable and doesn't particularly require any breaking in. It also looks like it is sealed on the sides for additional water resistance, which is good. It is very comfortable. Here it is on my about 7-inch wrist. And of course, with 20mm lugs, we are never short of options to replace this strap with. As for the hardware, Milifortic deployed a well-finished stainless steel buckle here, which is also signed. Right, so verdict time. Well, all in all, I think it is a good-looking chronograph with a very good sapphire crystal and a reputable Japanese Seiko movement in the back of it. Priced really well too, giving a serious run for the money to other brands that are making very similar timepieces. What are your thoughts? Well, do let us know in the comments. And if you want to see another Milifortic chronograph with this time solar-powered movement that I reviewed recently, well, check out my video I'll put it on the screen somewhere around here. Don't forget to like and of course subscribe. Thank you for watching, take care, and I will see you in the next video.